The most important thing that you need to know about carbs for fat loss and longevity isn't the specific kind of carbohydrate that you need to eat. It's actually more about generalizing carbohydrates, and probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in 15 years of doing what I do. In this world, we have proteins, we have fats, and we have carbohydrates. And we spend so much time focusing on the high quality versions of each of those macronutrients that sometimes we forget where the biggest levers that we can actually pull are. Where is the 20% effort that gives us the 80% result? And I'll tell you, it's not focusing on the quality of the carbohydrate. Let's dive into what I mean. I think you'll get a lot out of this video. After today's video, I put a link down below to our video sponsor, which is Seed. It's a 25% off discount link for a daily symbiotic. So it's a prebiotic and a probiotic in one capsule. So then you're getting a multi-stage delivery and potential colonization of the probiotics that are in the capsule. So you'll see there's a capsule inside of a capsule. So that way, first off, the prebiotics break down into your gut, kind of act as fodder for the microbiome, and then the probiotic portion breaks down a little bit further down the intestinal tract. So that is a 25% off discount link. It's literally the only probiotic that I recommend. So check out Seed down below after this video. A carb is a carb is a carb. Now, in some ways, this is true. In a lot of ways, this is true. And the meat and potatoes of what I'm saying here today is that we should not be focusing on the quality of carbohydrates as much as we should be focusing on the quality of fats. What do I mean by this? I mean that 80% of your focus should just come from protein in the first place. But if we look at the difference between a good carb and a bad carb, what is it? A good carb might be something like a sweet potato that has additional benefits to it, has additional carotenoids and antioxidants and flavonoids and insoluble fiber. It's a good carb. A bad carb would be bleached, refined sugar. Okay, but then when we get into the world of sugars, we have all kinds of different categories. So we have sweet potato over here being good, sugar over here being bad, but then within the sugar realm, we have good and bad too. We have honey, which actually seems to have positive effects on most people's metabolic health. And we have maple syrup, it's just about the same. We have dates, which similar. And then we have refined sugar, coconut sugar, all these other ones, right? The difference in space between a good carb and a bad carb is actually quite small when you compare it to the difference between a good fat and a bad fat, right? A good carb and a bad carb are not that far apart in the sense that at the end of the day, sure, some are better than others, but they really do just turn into glucose, right? There's not a whole lot else going on. With fats, let me put it into context. You have olive oil, one of the best fats that you could possibly consume. You have dairy fat, like C15 fats, some of the best fats you could ever consume. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a trans fat, which is something that straight up, even in small amounts, is metabolically damaging and can contribute to visceral fat. We're talking a huge difference between a good fat and a bad fat. A ridiculous delta between those two, whereas with carbs, yes, there is a difference between a good carb and a bad carb. But at the end of the day, they're still just carbs and they're relatively close together. So what am I trying to say with this? It is 100 times more important for you to focus on the quality of your fats than the quality of your carbs. Because we have evidence that demonstrates that varying levels of poor quality fats contribute to oxidative damage or peroxidation. If we consume oxidized oils, that directly leads to oxidative stress. Now, if we can consume a high amount of sugar, sure, we could have glycation, sure, we could have blood sugar issues, sure, we could have an elevated HbA1c, but a lot of those things are coming because of a caloric surplus that happened in the first place, or a lifetime of poor metabolic health, or a lifetime of overconsumption. And I'm not saying that if you just consume like a bad fat, like an oxidized seed oil or soybean oil one time, that it's going to be bad. But I am saying that there's more evidence supporting that the oxidation in those oils is metabolically problematic than occasionally having some sugar. So when you're focusing on what makes the most sense for your diet, what is the biggest lever that you can pull, the biggest lever, hands down, is prioritizing protein. I don't care whether it's plant-based protein or animal-based protein. That's a moot point right now. Focusing on that as your mainstay, that is your staple. Then focus on the quality of your fats. Don't spend a lot of time and energy focusing on the quality of your carbs. If that is a huge concern for you, it might be wise to just eliminate them altogether so you're not having to pick and choose. Now, again, I'm going to back up and say that if you are dealing with some kind of insulin resistance or metabolic health issue, then yes, lower glycemic carbohydrates are probably better. But you can accomplish a lot of that alone by still have honey. You could have maple syrup, you could have dates, and just have it along with protein, and you're basically lowering the glycemic value of that food. So does it come down to really choosing the perfect carb source, when in reality, we're not getting a lot of vitamins and minerals from so much of our carbohydrates to begin with? We're getting a lot of vitamins and minerals from the good quality food that we eat in the first place, things like ground beef, maybe some chicken breast, maybe some turkey, maybe some fish, getting those omega-3s, maybe just making sure we get our minerals in from some vegetables and vitamins there and from our fruits. But from our starchy carbohydrates and from our potatoes and from our rice and from our sugars, we're not getting much nutritional value other than just carbohydrates anyway. So the lens in which you look at carbohydrates really should just be carbohydrates. Pretty straightforward. Again, 100 times better off focusing on the quality of your fats. What does that look like? I would say olive oil, avocado oil, those are up at the top, followed closely behind by dairy fat. Okay, things like myristic acid, these other fats that are there. Followed closely behind by fresh polyunsaturated fats and omega-3s. And I can't even give you the adequate breakdown of what's best and what's worst. But all I can tell you is that avoiding the oxidized oils and avoiding the trans fats and the polyunsaturated fats, that is far more important to avoid than avoiding the sugar. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.